Greetings all, and welcome to Lucas Brews. In this video, we'll be doing another inbox review of a 1/72nd scale Curtiss Helldiver, this time the Academy kit with the Operation Iceberg release. So without further ado, let's have a look at this kit and see how it compares to the Airfix, Matchbox and Sword kits which I've previously looked at. So according to ScaleMates, the Academy SB2C Helldiver originally came out in 2005, making it about 4 years younger than the limited run Sword kit which we've had a look at. This particular release with the Operation Iceberg schemes, which I believe is the invasion of Okinawa, was originally released in 2016, although it's also been reissued in 2020, and Special Hobbies have also released a slightly different version with the later SB2C5, but it's pretty much the same kit with a few extra parts from what I understand. But focusing in on this kit, we have a very professional and clean looking box with a nice illustration, some really nice display or styling on the text there, and we've got some sort of schematics kind of in the background on the box, so it looks really clean and professional there. We've got the Academy logo and website link down there. I mentioned that glue and paint is not included, and that the actual product can be a bit different from the pictures shown on the box. On the underside here, we've got 3 different markings included, with one from the USS Randolph in 1945, another from the USS Bunker Hill, and finally one from Yorktown. So all 3 of these aircraft, I believe, were involved in the invasion of Okinawa. And we also have some notes about some of the features of this kit, mentioning it's obviously a World War II US Navy dive bomber. It has accurately detailed panel lines and rivets, a precisely engraved cockpit with landing gear and bomb bay, dive flaps and other photo etched parts included, and cartograph decal. Well, decals, I believe. So all really great things to see there. The sides of the box just contain a repeat, and on the top here we have a paint index for all the colours that you'll need to make it to a high quality. We've got various different indicators, including Vallejo Model Colour and Model Air, which is what I'll be using, but we've also got Revell, Enamel and Acrylics, Testers / Model Master, we've got Live Colour, GSI and Humbrol, so pretty much every single one of the major paint brands there, which is brilliant. Plus we've then just got a name and the FS code for each of these colours, which is also really handy. We've got various warnings in different languages as well as a barcode, and we've got a warning that this is for ages 14 plus, so a bit of a more advanced kit by the looks of things. Nothing on the back of the box, which is pretty typical, so we'll open it up and have a look at what's inside. So as a standard for Academy, it's a top opening box, and on the inside we have a single plastic bag here containing 2 light grey kind of bluish moulded sprues, along with another bag that contains our clear parts. Then we've got the usual kind of warnings that you get in Academy kits, a nice sheet here with the decals, and on the back there we've also got our photo etch. And at the very bottom we have our instructions and the marking guides. Amongst the various kind of guides and basic beginner instructions, which are probably a little bit redundant in this kit given that it's more advanced and the box very clearly indicates that, but hey, you've got these here if you need to have a read of all of the basics and need a bit of assistance. And then we've got 2 sheets here. The first one, which is our main instructions, has a nice picture again of the illustrated aircraft that's on the box. And we've once again got our colour guide, along with a key for all of the things you may have to do within the instructions. The instructions are in a fold-out format, which I'm not a big fan of as it takes up a lot of space compared to a booklet, though obviously you can always fold the instructions over and have it just on a single particular step. On the back of the instructions, we've also got our parts diagram, which is really handy to have in more complicated kits. And there also is the common decal marking at the bottom of that, but we'll have a look at that later. Opening it up, we've then got our assembly guide, starting with the bomb bay, which gets a few panels added and then inserted to one of the fuselage sides. And then we've got our cockpit. So there's a few sidewall details by the looks of things, along with a bulkhead for the pilot's area. And then for the pilot, we've got his seat, along with the joystick and some sort of hand pump. Then there's another bit of sidewall detailing, looks like perhaps some throttle controls of some kind, and then we've got a single piece here for the instrument panel, so already a lot more complicated than any of the other Helldivers and a lot more detailed than so far we've seen. Then we've also got the rear gunner / radio operator's position here, so we've got what looks like a bit of assembly for his kind of rear bulkhead area, and then we've got this kind of strange looking thing which I believe is some sort of system for mounting the machine gun or perhaps some navigation equipment. But anyways, that gets assembled and installed to the rear of the aircraft. We've then got more sidewall detail parts for him, and then we've got his 30 cal machine guns. So we've got a little kind of armoured plate there, I believe, with the little vision slot through the middle there. And then this extra little bit of armour on the sides there, getting attached to the guns. And then we've got a nice little bit of structure for his seats there, which then gets made up and attached to the guns. And that can be installed along with the radio stack here. We've got painting guides for some of the smaller parts, as you can see, and little indicators of where the decals go, which looks pretty detailed. And once you've made up all of that, you've got one more bit of sidewall detailing to add to the radio operator's position. And once you've done that, you can add the tailhook into place and join the two fuselage halves together. So a very nice detailed looking cockpit by the looks of things. On the next page here, we've got our exhausts, which come as two separate pieces, and there's a few little indicators of how they're supposed to be positioned. And then for our bomb bay, we've got the option of two bombs by the looks of things, with the nice little trapeze. So they get assembled up and then installed into the bomb bay, and you've also got these bomb bay doors. Then once you've done that, you've got step 7 here, which involves joining our two wing halves. Although before you do that, you've also got to add what looks like the 20mm cannon barrel, kind of going through the landing gear bay there, and you've also got an indication here to drill out two holes. I'm not sure if we've got drop tanks or external rockets for the underside of the wings there, but obviously they're indicating that for some reason. It mentions that we've got photo etched parts assembly in 9 to 11 page of manual 2. So I believe that would be the second piece of paper we have, but we'll have a look at those a bit later. But once you've assembled the wings, by the looks of things, you then add them straight onto the aircraft, and you've then got the little slat at the front there and the horizontal stabilizers. You've got the option to have the slats extended, and then you've also got landing gear. It doesn't mention any option to have the landing gear retracted, but I'd imagine it'd be reasonably simple to just glue the landing gear doors into the closed position. But for the extended one, you've basically just got the wheels getting attached to the strut there, and then you've got this little bracket kind of piece that attaches to that. And then you've got the top of the, or the end of the barrels there, which has an external piece that you glue to the leading edge of the wing. Turning over the page, for step 10, we're then adding the landing gear bay doors. So we've got them in two sections for each side. And then we've got this underwing pylon, which doesn't appear to have any attachment, but maybe we add that a little bit later on. It looks like we've actually got the rocket attachment points pre-molded, so that's probably either for a bomb or a drop tank. For step 12, we've then got the engine, which has a single piece there with all of our cylinder head details and the gearbox. And we've got a little pin here, which if you don't glue to the engine, you'll obviously be able to mount the propeller to and have it rotate, which is cool. Once that's been installed, you can then add the engine cowling on, which looks like it's got the radiators molded in the open position. So a bit interesting that we don't have the option to have them closed, as they would probably be most of the time in flight. But if the aircraft's on the ground or running in a hot place, they'd definitely have those open. Then we've got our propeller assembly here, which is pretty simple. You've basically just got a spinner that goes on the top of the propeller and attaches to a hub piece, and then you can glue that onto the little spindle piece there. For step 13, we've got our gun sight there, which gets painted and installed to the glare shield, and then we can start adding our clear canopy sections. So it looks like all of the canopies come in separate pieces, which is awesome. That means you can have them opened or closed. So we've got the front windshield there, and then the mid windscreen here. Then we've got this sort of strange assembly. I'm not too sure what it is. Perhaps it's some sort of tube for navigation, or perhaps a communication passage for the pilot and the radio operator to talk to each other through. But either way, you've got this strange little cylinder thingy that gets installed to this midsection of the canopy. And once you've assembled that, you can add that on along with the clear shield that kind of goes over the machine gun area. We've then got the rear gunner's main sliding section of canopy, which you could probably have in the open or closed position. And by the looks of things, there's these little chutes which get glued onto them as well. So there's a lot of little details packed into this kit, which is awesome. Speaking of little details, we've also got the radio, or the sort of radar antennas, which get mounted on the bottom of the wing there, and it looks like you're doing that on both sides. After that, it mentions that we have to refer to the second manual to continue or finish building this kit, so it's a little bit more complicated than just what we've seen here. But the last thing that we've got on these instructions is also the common stencil markings, which is very similar to how WWII do it separately, which is great. So it's pretty easy to see where everything goes, and they look like they've gone to a lot of detail there, which is awesome to see. For the second set of instructions here, we've got a guide on how to deal with the photo etched parts, and then we start with basically assembling or folding up the sections of what look like the dive flaps. So we've got a few different part numbers, and basically it's showing you how to fold them to assemble the shapes for them. There's some nice diagrams of what everything should look like, so it's pretty easy to follow what's going on. It mentions about making wire here, which I'm assuming is for parts of the flaps there. So this looks like it gets very complicated, and if you were a beginner, I'd imagine this would probably be a little bit too much. But if you really wanted to add details, it's awesome that they go into such depth. On the other side of these instructions, it looks like we're adding some of these parts together or gluing them to make the dive flaps in the open position. And it's got a diagram of how they look with the speed or the dive breaks out, or if it's just the flaps there, which is cool. Little diagrams of the final assembly there, and guides on how to cut and fold everything to make the shapes. And then it shows how to kind of remove the flaps from the plastic parts by the looks of things, and then glue the flaps in the open position there. So nice and reasonably easy to follow, even though it's a very complicated assembly. The second set of instructions also contains our 3 marking guides, and annoyingly it's in black and white, and you also have to refer to the original set of instructions to figure out which color is which based on the triangled number codes. Although I do still appreciate that they've separated it so you've only got your scheme decals on this sheet of paper, and then you've got the common stencils on our other little one in here. So that makes it a little bit better. Fortunately as well, they're also pretty standard schemes with either the 2 gloss blue ones and then the 3-tone camouflage as well. Although you do get a bit of variation with the Bunker Hill aircraft having a yellow stripe on its nose, and the Randolph aircraft appears to have, I think that's white, number 13, let's see. Yep, so it's got white markings on the ailerons and the tail there. So not too bad with the instructions. It would have been awesome if they were in color, but hey, they're still pretty good, nicely laid out, and as you can see, definitely a more complicated and detailed Helldiver compared to the other ones I've looked at. Moving right along to our plastic parts, I'll open up the bag that they're all contained in. So similar to the sword kit, we have rather large sprues, although these are even bigger, and they contain all of the parts within the framework, which keeps them nice and protected. So we'll start off with the sprue down the bottom here, which contains our fuselage halves here. And as you can see, we've got some really lovely crisp recess details, very clearly defined, with different recesses for all the handles for where the crew grab to get into the aircraft, and all the little rivet details around the access hatches around the engine. Plus we've got some really nice raised hinge details on some of these parts here. And I really love the ones on these little flaps down the bottom there, so everything looks really beautiful and crisp. The fabric control surfaces have raised sort of ribbing on them, which looks pretty good. And we've got some really nice recessed rivet details around the fairings for the horizontal and the vertical stabilizers there. So all looking pretty good. There doesn't appear to be too much flash or any flash at all really. So yeah, very fantastic and high quality molding by the looks of things. No actual molded detail on the inside of the fuselages here, but as you saw in the instructions, they're all contained as separate parts, which we'll have a closer look at. Although we do have guide marks and pins here to help line things up, so really nicely engineered. We've got some really lovely looking wheels there with some absolutely fantastic hub details. Hopefully the camera's picking it all up, but we've got recessed details for the tread marks. And very little seam line, or I don't even think there's any seam line at all on these, which is pretty impressive. Our pilot seat here has some really interesting raised riveting detail on the outside there, and a little bit of thin framework there, so that looks pretty good. Not too sure what this little piece is here, but we've got what looks like parts of these sidewall details there, with some recessed details and some raised bumps and rivets. We've got the floor section, I believe, for the rear gunner there, with, again, some raised ribbing and rivet details on the sides there, which look pretty nice. We've got our radio stack here with some raised bumps and details for all of the radio equipment there, which looks pretty good. We've got our rear gunner's seat just here, which looks pretty fantastic with the framework as well as the circular kind of ring that the machine gun's attached to. Looks like some fuse details and some control wheels of some kind for some more of the sidewall details. And then we've got our horizontal stabilizers, what looks like the upper surface of them. We've basically got two halves for each one there, and again, some really fantastic and crisp recessed details, with the sort of raised details for the ribbing around the fabric control surfaces, which looks really great. Love the little access hatches and details there, and the little trim tab on one side also looks really good. We've got our machine guns here, which are a little bit more basic than some of these other parts, but not too bad for plastic 30 cals. We've got our pitot tube with the massive kind of horn at the end there and the strange kind of rise that gets it further away from the wings. We've got our tail hook there with a little bit of a ejector pin mark sort of molded to it, but that shouldn't be too hard to clean up. We've got attachment points for our underwing pylons, and I've just realized there doesn't appear to be anything to attach to them in the instructions, but maybe we've got some spare bombs that we can put on if you want. Our propeller there has raised rivet details, which is a bit different on the inner part of the blades there. And then we've got some nice little bits of detail for the spinner where the blades would change angles, although most of that's going to be hidden by our spinner here, which is pretty cleanly molded. There is a little bit of flash on some of the inner parts here, which is going to be a little bit annoying to clean up, but not too bad at all, really. We've got our engine here with some really nice recessed details there, as very cleanly molded and very crisp. I do have a 3D print design of the R2600, so I may be tempted to replace it with my own, just to add a little bit of more detail with the wiring. But honestly, out of the box, that looks really fantastic, and it is a pretty big cowling, so it is a little bit hidden. But pretty good there. We've then got our cockpit floor here, which has some very fantastic rivet details. Interestingly, it's got raised panel lines for the different sections of the floor there. On the underside there, we've got our bomb bay details, and they're definitely a massive step up from the Airfix one. We've got raised details for the wiring and all of the ribbing there for attaching the bombs, and some very fantastic looking little details all the way through. There are some ejector pin marks, which are in a little bit of an annoying spot. Probably be able to remove them with a little bit of sanding or a tiny bit of putty, but still not too bad. Then in this corner here, we've got our pilot's rear sidewall here with some wiring details and then the framework along with the headrest, which looks really good. Definitely a lot more detail and crisp and clean compared to this sword kit, which is the only other Helldiver that's had a detailed cockpit that I've looked at. We've then got our covers for the exhaust there with the holes drilled out for where the exhaust will actually go, so that's a nice little touch with some nice raised rivet details on them. We've got some other smaller parts here, which looks like the pilot's joystick and then the other little thing that's in the cockpit there. More details for the bomb bay, really fantastically done there with all of that little bit of wiring detail. We've got some other control wheel, possibly the throttle controls for the sidewalls. Looks like more parts of the pylon, really nice and cleanly molded. And finally, we've got our exhausts, which they have attempted to drill out. And actually, I think yeah, there we go. They've fully drilled them out on the inside there, so that's really fantastic. And we've finally got our engine cowling here with the cow flaps molded in the open position. No detail on the inside of them, so it might be worth adding a tiny bit there. And the detail on the cowling's not too bad. I have seen them a little bit better with the ribbing or the sort of bar details on the intake there for the oil cooler. I'm not sure if every Helldiver had it, but I think they did, so that might be a little bit inaccurate, but not too bad. At least the detail is very crisp and clean, and I'm sure with a little bit of work you could add the bars in. It might also be worth drilling them out too, so just adding a tiny bit more detail to keep up with the rest of the kit. But otherwise, really fantastic and cleanly molded sprues with a lot of really beautiful and fantastic detail. The other grey sprue here contains our wings in the center here, which again have really beautiful recessed details. Even the flaps there have really fantastic perforations and holes there. It would have been absolutely incredible if they had them fully drilled out, but that's not the case. Although, as we'll see, we've got some photo etch ones. We've got the rocket attachment points molded to the underside of the wings there, but unfortunately it doesn't appear we've got any rockets to actually attach, which is a bit of a shame, but oh well, I'm sure you could 3D print them or make some scratch build ones or even find some spare in other kits. Really fantastic detailing on all of these access hatches and ports. They look absolutely beautiful, and I love all the little rivets. They've even done the little sawtooth kind of indents on the upper surface of the dive flaps there, so absolutely beautiful. On the inside of the upper wings, we've got the details for the inner part of the landing gear bay. There are a few ejector pin marks, but nothing too major, and most of the other ones are all in hidden spots, which is great. Not too sure what these are. They look like they should be for lining up the upper wing, but there's nothing that appears to actually lock into them. There's no like positive pin to attach like we've got with the edges there, so a bit strange that we've got those little sucker cup kind of looking things there, but maybe that's for a different version of this kit. Outside of that, we've then got in this corner the details for the landing gear. I think they've basically done these frames but as a solid piece just to make them a little bit more solid and possible to mold, but I'm sure if you're crazy you could probably try and drill those out and make them more accurate. We've then got this part here, which is the bulkhead for the rear gunner's position with what looks like some spare ammunition there molded to the bulkhead, and we've got some raised rivet and ribbing details around where the guns would retract when they're not in use. We've got our radio antennas there, very, very finely molded, and we've got that cradle kind of piece, which I think the gun would attach to, that sort of goes on this part here, but not 100% sure. More landing gear parts with the bay doors, and they've done a really nice job with raised ribbing details on the inside of these. There's again some ejector pin marks, but I don't think you're going to see too much of that behind the landing gear struts. Not any detail on the outside there, but luckily there's no sink marks, so that's already good. We've got some sort of interior part, I believe, that possibly goes in that cylinder thing that's in this corner here. Then we've got our bomb bay doors with some recessed access hatches and riveting on the outside, and on the inside really fantastic raised details with some recessed holes and perforations. Not too sure if some of these are actually ejector pin marks, but they might actually be at part of the structure, so not entirely sure there. We've got more sidewall details here, really fantastic ones here with the wiring details molded in and all those little bits of equipment which look fantastic and going to be a lot of fun to paint up. We've got some parts of the machine gun armored shielding there which look pretty good. We've got the trapezes here for the bombs, which I believe would have swung them clear similar to the Stuka, although we have two, so even better. We've got our landing gear struts here and the 20mm cannons with some really nice fine details on them there, and they're all pretty cleanly molded, which is great. We've got our pin here for the propeller to attach to, the little antenna that goes on the front of the engine cowling area with some recessed rivet details for where it would attach. And here we've got our really fantastically done main instrument panel there. We've got a mixture of raised panels with recessed details or holes for where the gauges are, but if you look really closely on the inside, they've actually managed to mold raised details for the inner parts or the dial details, which is absolutely insane. I've tried 3D printing these and they come out okay, but this looks even more detailed, which is absolutely crazy. We've even got raised switches and details on the sides there, so really fantastic looking instrument panel. That's going to be a lot of fun to paint. We've got the attachment point for the machine guns there on the rear gunner's sort of mounting position. Not too sure what this part is here, and these appear to be the 20mm cannon inserts that go in the wings here. We've got the little attachment or pylons that the radar antennas sit on the underside of the wings. We've got our bombs here. I believe they are either 250 or 500 pound bombs there, and they're pretty nicely detailed. And finally, we've got our leading edge slats, and unfortunately the one for the left side here has split, and there's, yeah, it's probably split in half there. So that's going to need a bit of repair, but otherwise they are pretty nicely done. The last set of sprues we have are our clear parts in this little... So taking a closer look at our clear parts, they don't look too bad. I've definitely seen newer kits with much better quality in terms of the thickness and also the distortion. As you can see, looking through the canopy framework at my finger, there is a little bit of distortion going on. And if you look really closely at some of the frames, there are some hairline sort of scratches, and there's a bit of a funny texture on the window frames that sort of look a bit distorted or sort of raised bumps. So not the best quality, but definitely a lot better than the other Helldiver canopies that we've looked at, and I really appreciate that they've done them in separate sections, so you could have the machine gun position open if you want, or the pilot's canopy open as well, and see in and look at the fantastic cockpit detail that we're going to get. A little bit of a shame they're not molded to the same high quality as the rest of the sprues, but still not too bad. Finally, to have a look at in this kit, we have our decals and also our photo etch. So our photo etch looks really fantastic there. Really awesome that they've included photo etching for the dive brakes and the flaps there. I believe that's basically all that we've got, and it looks like it's a bit of a complicated and fiddly process, but I'm sure the detail that we're going to get out of them is probably going to be worth it in the end if you have them opened. It would have been nice if we had a clear bit of plastic or some cardboard just to protect these parts while they're in the bag, but they seem to have survived just fine, and yeah, I'm definitely going to have to try and use them on at least one of the Helldivers. I'd really love if I could try and find a way to make the dive flaps open and close, but I think at this scale that's just going to be way too fiddly. Maybe running like a copper wire might work and I could try and hinge them, but yeah, if I can figure out a way and I feel like doing it, I definitely will, because that would be awesome to have a Helldiver that I can open the flaps on when it's in stop motions. But otherwise, I may just have them in either the opened or closed position and just swap them out, if that makes sense. So keep the plastic ones and then put them on the model when they're closed and then put these in place, or I'll work out something. But I think I definitely have to try and at least use these, even if it's going to be a very annoying and fiddly task. And finally, we have our decals, and they look really fantastic, as they should, because they're printed by Cartograph. So really high quality on all of even the common stencils. You can pretty much read absolutely everything there, which is incredible printing detail and quality. There's sort of a glossy film over all of the decals, and they appear to be, or it appears to be pretty consistent, which is great. And they've even survived me slightly bending them as I pulled them out of the bag there, so that's good. Some of these common walkway markings have a lot of clear film there, which is going to be a real pain if that's silvers. Hopefully it won't be in Cartograph, but definitely would recommend some gloss varnish to avoid anything nasty like that happening. But if it does work, that would be really awesome, because that's going to save a lot of pain trying to line up all those tiny bits of text. And our main markings for the aircraft look really great. I didn't realize that our tail for the Randolph aircraft is included with the white striping, so that's really awesome. Going to save a lot of pain with painting. And yeah, we've got these decals here for the interior, but honestly, I reckon it's going to be better to paint them, and that's probably what I'm going to do when I get around to building this one. Absolutely fantastic job with the decals, seem of really great quality, and knowing what Cartograph's like, they are going to be absolutely excellent. So that wraps up my look at the Academy US Navy SB2C Helldiver with the Operation Iceberg release. So, compared to the other three Helldivers I've looked at, this is definitely leaps and bounds ahead of all of them. Even the Sword Helldiver, which did contain similar levels of detail in some areas, was still lacking in others, and the Academy kit definitely is to a much higher quality, not being a limited run kit. So, fantastic recessed details, great cockpit interior details, a bomb bay, photo etching for the dive brakes, and Cartograph decals. Really fantastic, but there is a little bit of a catch, and that is the price tag. So in Australia, this one retails for around about 50 AUD, although sometimes a little bit more and sometimes a little bit less, which is, in my opinion, quite expensive for a single-engined World War II warbird like the Helldiver. Although I can see why with all of the extra parts with the photo etching and the decals, but still. So if you're wanting a larger fleet of Helldivers, you're probably better off trying to get a bunch of Matchbox or Airfix ones second-hand for a bit cheaper. But if you want a really awesomely detailed Helldiver and you've got a bit of experience behind you, this is definitely a fantastic kit and definitely a lot better than the other ones I've looked at. I'm very much looking forward to building this one, even though it's going to be a bit of a challenge, I reckon. I probably wouldn't have bought it if I wasn't looking at the other Helldivers, just because of that scary price tag, but I'm very glad that I've got 3 markings included, because I'm probably going to end up using these 2 for the other Helldivers, since the decals on the Airfix one are probably not usable, and I don't know if I trust the Sword ones either. So it'd be great to have a few different ones from the different units that they were using it, and the gloss blue and the tricolour I both think look really great, so good to have examples of both. And I'm also going to use it as a bit of inspiration to help design some 3D printed parts that I'll be putting in the other Helldivers to make them a little bit more detailed. So I hope you've enjoyed our look at the 4 different Helldivers. I believe there is the special hobby kit that I've mentioned, although it's pretty much this kit but with a few different parts. And apart from that, I'm not too aware of any other 1/72nd scale Helldivers, but if I do run into any, I will probably do a build video on them. But otherwise, it'll probably be just these 4. Thank you very much for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed it and got something out of it. If you did, please be sure to leave a like, and make sure you subscribe and turn notifications on so you don't miss any of the build videos on these Helldivers when I get around to making them. A massive shout out to my wonderful patrons for helping me to fund not only buying these kits, but also the products I use to make them and the time I spend making these videos. If you want to help support my channel and my projects financially, then be sure to check out my Patreon, the link to which I'll leave in the description, along with a link to my Cults page and my eBay shop in Australia. Thanks again for watching, and until the next video, as always, take care and model on.